I just wanted a peaceful birthday dinner. I never imagined that 48 hours later, the entire country would watch my stepmother being handcuffed on the evening news because of a recording in my therapist's office. She slapped me and laughed, convinced no one would believe a damaged veteran. But when your family uses your name to steal millions in government funds, the hardest question becomes, am I a daughter or am I a witness? My name is Riley Monroe. There is a specific kind of gray that hangs over Tacoma in November. It is heavy, like a wet wool blanket that smells of salt water and diesel from the port. I had spent the last 8 years in deserts where the sun felt like a physical weight pressing down on my skull. So coming back to Washington State felt like walking into a freezer. I was 29 years old today. I had a job in logistics for a civilian contractor, coordinating supply chains that moved faster than I did these days. I had a small apartment that smelled like lemon polish and old books. I had a life that was quiet, ordered, and mine. But tonight, seated at a corner table in a restaurant that charged $40 for an entree, I was not Sergeant Monroe. I was just the daughter trying to survive a birthday dinner without casualties. The restaurant was one of those places perched on the edge of Commencement Bay, where the menu did not list prices, and the candlelight was dim enough to hide stains on the tablecloth, but bright enough to reflect off the diamond tennis bracelet on my stepmother's wrist. My father, Daniel, sat across from me. He looked older than I remembered. The lines around his eyes deepened by something that looked less like age and more like a permanent state of exhaustion. He smiled, raising his wine glass, but his eyes kept darting to the woman beside him, checking for permission to enjoy the moment. Victoria, my stepmother. She was beautiful in the way a marble statue is beautiful, cold, hard, and expensive. She wore a silk blouse that probably cost more than my first car, and her hair was pulled back in a chignon so tight it made my own scalp ache just looking at it. She had organized this dinner. She had picked the restaurant. She had even ordered the wine before I arrived, a heavy red that she knew I hated. "Happy birthday, Riley," she said, her voice smooth as glass. "I am surprised you made it on time. I know schedules can be difficult for you to manage lately, with the transition and all." She sat with her back straight, shoulders pinned, controlling the space around her like a general on a battlefield. Every movement she made was precise. She moved the salt shaker 2 inches to the left. She adjusted the napkin on her lap. She signaled the waiter with a flick of her wrist that was barely visible but impossible to ignore. It was a performance of power, subtle and suffocating. Next to her sat Lena, her daughter and my stepsister. Lena was 24, soft where I was sharp, pliable where I was rigid. She was picking at her salmon with a fork, refusing to meet my eyes. She wore a dress that looked suspiciously like one I had donated to charity 3 years ago, but on her, it looked new. There was a nervous energy radiating off her, a mix of guilt and that familiar envy she always wore when she looked at me, like she wanted my independence but was terrified of the cost I had paid for it. "The traffic was fine," I said, keeping my voice neutral. I cut a piece of my steak, focusing on the texture of the meat rather than the way Victoria was inspecting my outfit. I was wearing a simple black blazer and jeans, clean, functional. Victoria was looking at a loose thread on my cuff like it was a moral failing. "Well, we are just glad you are here," my dad said, his voice too loud, too cheerful. "It has been months, kiddo. The company keeps you busy?" "Logistics never sleeps, Dad," I said, offering him a small smile. "But it is good work, organized. I like it." "It must be so different from the service," Victoria interjected. She took a sip of her wine, leaving a perfect crimson crescent on the rim of the glass. "Although, I suppose old habits die hard. Your father tells me you are still seeing that specialist in Seattle. Dr. Pierce, was it? Is it wise to be driving that far? I worry about your focus on the road. You know, with the episodes." The air at the table seemed to vanish. My dad flinched, staring down at his plate. Lena stopped eating entirely, her fork hovering over her fish. I kept my hands steady. I had trained for high-stress environments. I had diffused situations involving armed insurgents. I could handle a woman with a passive-aggressive streak and a glass of Merlot. They are not episodes. Victoria, I said, my voice calm. It is standard reintegration therapy. It helps process the transition, and I am fine. My driving record is cleaner than yours. Victoria gave a small, tinkling laugh that sounded like ice cubes hitting the bottom of a glass. Oh, Riley, always so defensive. We are family. We just want to make sure you are stable, for your own good. She reached out and patted my father's hand. He didn't pull away, but he didn't lean into it either. He just looked tired. I watched him, searching for the man who used to teach me how to fish, the man who used to stand up for me. But he was buried somewhere under layers of compromise and Victoria's influence. The waiter arrived to clear the plates. The clatter of silverware filled the silence. Victoria leaned back, dabbing her mouth with a linen napkin. She turned her head slightly toward Lena, shielding her mouth from my father and me with her hand, pretending to inspect a smudge on Lena's collar. In the meantime, Victoria whispered, her voice pitched low, as soon as we order dessert, you need to excuse yourself. Go to her apartment. The locksmith is meeting you there at 8:30. Make sure the new deadbolt is the one I bought. She does not have a home to go back to tonight. The world seemed to slow down. I did not gasp. I did not drop my fork. I did not look up. I chewed. I swallowed. And I took a sip of water. Inside my chest, the heart that usually raced with anxiety suddenly slowed down into a heavy, rhythmic thud. It was the rhythm of combat. Situation report. My brain commanded. Overriding the hurt. Overriding the shock. Hostiles in close proximity. Objective unclear. Asset compromised. I looked at Lena. Her face was pale. Her eyes wide and wet. Her hand was shaking as she held her water glass. She knew. She had known all along. That was why she couldn't look at me. She was the soldier following orders, even if she hated the war. I looked at my dad. He was busy trying to signal the waiter for the dessert menu. He was asking about the crème brûlée. He did not know, or maybe he just did not want to know. He was talking about caramelized sugar while his wife was plotting to make his daughter homeless on her birthday. Why? Why tonight? Why the locks? I paid my own rent. My name was on the lease. Victoria had no legal standing to touch my apartment, unless something had changed. Unless they had done something while I was distracted with work and Dr. Pierce. My phone vibrated against the wood of the table. I slid it into my lap, keeping my movement concealed by the tablecloth. It was a reflex. Check communications. Assess threats. It was a message from a number I did not have saved in my contacts. There was no text, just an image. I tapped it open. The screen brightness was low, but the image was unmistakable. It was a photo of my apartment door in downtown Tacoma. The familiar brass number 304 was visible, but it was not just my door. There was a police cruiser parked at the curb, the red and blue lights washing out the details of the brickwork, and across the frame of my door, there was a strip of yellow tape. Do not enter. My stomach dropped. Police tape? Why would the police be involved if Victoria was just changing the locks? A lock change is a civil dispute. Police tape meant a crime scene. It meant investigation. It meant something much darker was happening at the place where I slept, the only place I felt safe. I looked up at Victoria. She was smiling at the waiter, ordering a chocolate tart. She looked serene. She looked like a woman who had handled every loose end. She wanted Lena to get there at 8:30. That was in 20 minutes. She wanted the locks changed after whatever the police were doing, or was the police presence part of her plan? The pieces didn't fit yet, but the threat was clear. I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor, a harsh, jagged sound that cut through the ambient jazz music. Several heads at nearby tables turned. Victoria looked up, annoyed, her perfect eyebrows drawing together. We have not ordered dessert yet. Riley, sit down. You are making a scene. My father looked up, startled. Riley, is everything okay? I looked at him, really looked at him. I wanted to scream. I wanted to show him the picture on my phone. I wanted to ask him how he could let this happen, but I knew Victoria. If I showed the picture now, she would twist it. She would say I was hallucinating, that I was having an episode, that I was unfit. She would use my reaction as proof of my instability. No, I had to secure the perimeter first. I had to see the ground truth. I grabbed my leather jacket from the back of the chair. I did not look at my father. I could not bear to see the confusion, or worse, the relief, on his face. I leaned in close to Victoria. I invaded her personal space, violating the unspoken boundaries she maintained with everyone. I was close enough to smell her expensive floral perfume, gardenias and jasmine, which barely masked the scent of something rotting beneath it. She flinched, just slightly. Her eyes hardened. "I am leaving," I said. My voice was level, cold, and void of any emotion. It was the voice I used when calling in coordinates for an airstrike. "Do not be dramatic, Riley," she hissed, her smile fixed for the benefit of the other diners. "Sit down." "If tonight is a performance," I whispered, loud enough for only her and Lena to hear, "then I guarantee the second act will not follow your script." I turned and walked away. I did not look back. I marched through the restaurant, my boots heavy on the polished floor, leaving the warmth, the wine, and the betrayal behind me. Outside, the rain was coming down in sheets, washing the city in gray. I pulled my keys out of my pocket. My hand was not shaking. I had a war to fight, and for the first time in a long time, the enemy wasn't a memory. She was family. The drive from the restaurant to my apartment building usually took 15 minutes, but tonight the rain turned the interstate into a blur of red taillights and smeared asphalt. My windshield wipers slapped back and forth, a frantic metronome that matched the thudding of my pulse. I was not panicking. Panic is a luxury for civilians. I was assessing. I was calculating. But when I turned the corner onto my street and saw the blue and red strobe lights bouncing off the wet brick of my building, the calculation stopped and a cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. It was exactly like the picture on my phone, only worse because it was real. 2 patrol cars were parked at awkward angles near the curb. A few neighbors were standing under the awning of the bodega across the street, pointing and whispering. I parked my truck illegally behind the rear squad car and got out. The rain soaked through my jacket in seconds, chilling the skin that was already cold from the air conditioning in the restaurant. I ducked under the yellow tape that zigzagged across the front steps, my boots heavy on the pavement. "Ma'am, you need to step back. This is a crime scene." The voice came from a man standing near the entrance. He was not in uniform. He wore a damp trench coat that looked like it had been slept in, and his face was a map of sharp angles and weary lines. He held a notebook in one hand, shielding it from the rain with his body. "I live here," I said, my voice cutting through the sound of the storm. "Apartment 304, Riley Monroe." The man stopped writing. He looked at me, really looked at me, with eyes that were dark and unreadable. He did not look surprised. He looked like he was solving a math problem in his head. "Detective Cole Ramirez," he said, offering a curt nod rather than a handshake. "I was about to call the number on the lease. You are the only tenant listed?" "Yes. What happened? Was there a break-in?" Ramirez gestured for me to follow him into the lobby. Out of the rain, the smell of wet wool and floor wax hit me. He flipped his notebook closed. "That is the interesting part. Ms. Monroe, a neighbor called in a noise complaint about banging, followed by an open door. Patrol arrived 10 minutes later, but here is the thing. There was no forced entry." I stared at him. "What?" "The door frame is intact," Ramirez continued, his voice low and steady. "The lock was not picked. There are no scratches on the faceplate, no pry marks. Whoever went in there used a key, or they had a brand new lock ready to go." My mind flashed back to the restaurant, Victoria whispering to Lena, "Make sure the new deadbolt is the one I bought." "Can I go up?" I asked. "We have cleared the scene. Forensics is done dusting, though I doubt they will find much. It looks clean, too clean." I took the stairs 2 at a time, Ramirez trailing silently behind me. When I reached the third floor, my door was standing slightly ajar, the yellow tape cut and hanging loosely from the frame. I pushed it open and stepped inside. My apartment was small, a sanctuary of order I had built for myself after discharge. Usually, everything had a place: boots by the door, keys in the bowl, books aligned by height. At first glance, it looked normal. The television was still there. My laptop was sitting on the coffee table. The jewelry box on the dresser was closed. A common burglar would have swept this place clean in 5 minutes. But I walked deeper into the room, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. It was the details, the subtle violation of my space. The framed photograph of my unit in Afghanistan, the one I kept on the mantel, was face down. I reached out to touch it, then pulled my hand back. I moved to the bookshelf. My challenge coins, usually displayed in a specific order of rank and deployment, had been rotated 90 degrees, all of them. It was not a robbery, it was a message. It was someone saying, "I was here. I touched your life. I can get to you." "Nothing seems to be missing," Ramirez said from the doorway, observing my reaction. "But things have been moved, haven't they?" "Yes," I said, my voice tight. "Specific things, personal things." I walked into the small kitchen. On the counter, right in the center of the butcher block island, sat a plain white envelope. It was stark against the dark wood. There was no name on the outside. "We dusted it," Ramirez said. "No prints. Whoever left it was wearing gloves. You can open it." I picked up the envelope. It was not sealed. I pulled out a single sheet of printer paper. The text was typed. Standard font. Centered on the page. "Tell your stepmother. The truth always finds its way home." I read it twice. The words seemed to vibrate on the page. It was the same phrasing as the text message I had received at the restaurant. Stepmother, not mother, not parents. "Does that mean anything to you?" Ramirez asked. He had moved closer, his presence unobtrusive but intense. I looked up at him. My stepmother, Victoria, she asked my stepsister to come here tonight. While we were at dinner, she wanted to change the locks. Ramirez raised an eyebrow. "Change the locks? On an apartment you lease?" "She likes control," I said, keeping it vague. "But she claimed I had given her a key years ago for emergencies. She thought she was doing me a favor, or punishing me. I am not sure which." "So, the family has keys?" Ramirez scribbled something in his notebook. "My dad, Lena, my stepsister, and Victoria. They had a spare set." I paused, looking at the deadbolt on the door. "But that key would not have worked tonight." Ramirez stopped writing. "Why not?" "Because I changed the core 3 months ago," I said. "After a blowout argument with Victoria about her showing up unannounced, I never gave them the new key. I never gave anyone the new key." The silence in the room stretched out, heavy and thick. "If you did not give them a key," Ramirez said slowly, "and the door was not forced, then someone drilled this out and replaced it with a matching cylinder before we got here, or they had a master. Either way, that is professional work." He walked over to the door and examined the lock closely. "If this is a new lock installed tonight, there is a paper trail, locksmiths, security companies. They all leave invoices. Services leave digital footprints." "So we can find out who ordered it," I said. "We can find out who paid for it," Ramirez corrected. "And from which account. If someone paid a professional to swap this lock to stage a break-in, or to lock you out, that is unauthorized access. That is a crime." He looked at me, his dark eyes sharp. "You said the note mentions your stepmother specifically, not your father. Someone knows the dynamics of your house, Ms. Monroe. Someone knows exactly who pulls the strings." I looked back at the note. The truth always finds its way home. It felt like a threat, but not against me. It felt like I was the conduit, the messenger. "I cannot stay here tonight," I said. The thought of sleeping in this bed, knowing someone had been here, touching my photos, moving my medals, made my skin crawl. It felt contaminated. "I would not recommend it," Ramirez agreed. We will need to process the lock anyway. Do you have somewhere else to go? Family? No, I said instantly. Not family. I grabbed my go bag from the closet, always packed, old habit, and threw in a few extra sets of clothes. I took the envelope with me. 10 minutes later, I was back in my truck. The rain had not let up. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I could not go to a hotel. I needed to be somewhere that made sense to my nervous system, somewhere secure. I drove toward the outskirts of the city, toward the decommissioned military base that had been converted into transitional housing and support services for veterans. It was where I had first gone when I came back stateside. It was where I met Dr. Pierce. The roads were empty now. It was nearly midnight. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I glanced at it, expecting another anonymous message, but the name on the screen made my stomach clench harder than the crime scene had. Victoria. I debated not reading it. I debated throwing the phone out the window, but I needed to know the enemy's position. I tapped the message open. Riley, I am so disappointed you caused a scene and left. Lena went by the apartment but saw police and got scared away. Do not let your paranoia destroy this family. If you continue to act this unstable, I will have to talk to your doctor for you. We only want what is best. I read the text again. I will have to talk to your doctor for you. It was wrapped in concern, delivered with a velvet glove, but it was a threat. She was threatening to cross the line into my medical history, into the one space I had kept completely separate from her influence. She was telling me she could take my sanity away from me, just by whispering in the right ear. She called it paranoia. She did not know about the note. She did not know about the lock being changed by a third party, or maybe she did, and this was her covering her tracks. I pulled up to the gate of the transitional housing complex. The guard recognized my truck and waved me through. I parked in the visitor lot and walked to the temporary quarters I still had access to as a peer mentor. The room was sparse, a twin bed, a desk, a window looking out over the wet parade grounds. It smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. It was perfect. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the blank wall. I was tired. My body ached from the tension, but my mind was wide awake, spinning at 1,000 revolutions per minute. For years, I had fought to keep my past in the desert separate from my present in Tacoma. I thought the war was something I left behind in the sand. I thought the PTSD was a ghost I had to exorcise in private. But as I sat there, listening to the rain hammer against the roof, clutching the phone with Victoria's text still glowing on the screen, I realized I was wrong. The war had not ended. It had just changed theaters. It had moved from the battlefield to the dining room table, from the barracks to my own apartment. And the enemy was not an insurgent hiding in the hills. She was a woman in a silk blouse who wanted to gaslight me into submission. I laid back on the stiff mattress, but I did not close my eyes. I stared at the ceiling. I would not sleep tonight, but tomorrow, first thing in the morning. I was not just going to therapy to talk about loud noises and bad dreams. I was going to see Dr. Pierce. I needed to debrief. I needed to strategize. Because if Victoria wanted to bring my doctor into this fight, she was going to be surprised to find that I was already there, digging the trenches. Dr. Naomi Pierce's office in Seattle was designed to lower your heart rate. The walls were painted a soft, muted sage green, and the abstract art hanging above the sofa consisted of sweeping, gentle curves in shades of blue and gray. It was a space built for safety, for decompression. But as I sat in the deep armchair, my hands gripping the fabric of my jeans, I did not feel safe. I felt like I was giving an intelligence briefing on a hostile infiltration that just happened to be taking place inside my own life. On the small oak table between us sat the digital recorder Dr. Pierce used for all her sessions. A tiny red light glowed steady and unblinking. The only sharp thing in the room, I focused on it. It was proof. It was objective reality in a world where my stepmother tried to turn everything into smoke. Let me make sure I have the timeline correct, Dr. Pierce said. She was a woman in her 50s with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that missed nothing. She did not look up from her notepad. You were at dinner, your stepmother, Victoria. Instructed your stepsister to go to your apartment and change the locks. You received a photo of your apartment with police tape on the door. You went there, found no forced entry, but found personal items moved and a note addressed to your stepmother. Yes, I said. My voice was steady, but it took effort. The note said the truth always finds its way home, and my unit challenge coins were rotated. Specifically rotated. That is not a burglary. Doctor, that is psychological warfare. Doctor, Pierce set her pen down. And how did Victoria react when you left the dinner? She told me I was being dramatic, I said, a bitter laugh escaping my throat before I could catch it. She told me to sit down and eat my chocolate tart while she evicted me from my own life. Doctor, Pierce leaned back, crossing her legs. You have mentioned Victoria's control before, Riley, but we have mostly focused on your service, your transition back to civilian life. We have not spent much time unpacking the specifics of your relationship with her as an adult. I looked at the ceiling, trying to find the words that wouldn't sound like complaining. It is not like she beat me when I was a kid. She married my dad when I was 20. I was already in basic training. I was gone for most of their marriage. But whenever I came back on leave, it was the comments, the subtle digs. She would rewrite history. If I said I liked blue, she would tell everyone I hated blue and was just confused. If I remembered a conversation one way, she would laugh and tell my dad that the desert sun must have fried my memory. Gaslighting, Dr. Pierce said. It was not a question. She uses my service record as a weapon, I continued, the anger finally bubbling up through the discipline. I have PTSD. I know that. I own that. But she uses it to discredit everything I say. If I am angry that she spent my dad's retirement money on a new car, I am having an episode. If I question why her daughter gets a job at the family company and I get ignored, I am paranoid. She has convinced my father that I am a ticking time bomb, so he does not have to listen to the bomb ticking in his own marriage. Doctor, Pierce watched me for a long moment. The silence stretched, heavy and thick. I think, Dr. Pierce said slowly, that we need to bring them in. I froze. What? A joint session, she said. You, me, Victoria, and your father. If this dynamic is escalating to the point of lock changes and police involvement, we need to establish boundaries in a controlled environment. I need to see the dynamic to help you navigate it. She will eat you alive, I warned. She is good at this. She will make me look crazy, and she will come out smelling like rosewater. I have been doing this for 30 years, Riley, Dr. Pierce said, a small, dry smile touching her lips. I have dealt with combat veterans, narcissists, and politicians, sometimes all three in the same person. I can handle a stepmother, but I need you to trust me. The goal is not to win an argument. The goal is to let the truth enter the room. I looked at the recorder again. The little red light, an objective witness. Okay, I said. Bring them in. 2 days later, the air in the office felt different. The sage-green walls seemed to close in. Victoria entered first. She was wearing a beige cashmere cardigan that looked soft enough to sleep in, and her face was a mask of weary maternal concern. My father followed her, looking like a man marching to the gallows, clutching his hat in his hands. Dr. Pierce, Victoria said, extending a manicured hand. Her voice was low, cultured, perfect. Thank you so much for seeing us. We have been so worried about Riley. This last week, well, it has been a lot for everyone. She sat down on the sofa, smoothing her skirt, leaving just enough room for my father to squeeze in beside her. I sat in the armchair, alone, across from them. The battle lines were drawn. Dr. Pierce sat in her usual spot, the recorder humming on the table between us. Thank you for coming. Riley has shared some concerns about recent events, specifically regarding her housing and privacy. I thought it would be productive to discuss these boundaries together. Victoria sighed, a sound that carried the weight of 1,000 imaginary burdens. She looked at me with sad eyes. Oh, Riley, is this about the locksmith? Honey, we were just trying to help. You know how you get when you're stressed. You lose things, keys, wallets. We just wanted to make sure you were safe. especially living downtown. I did not lose my keys, I said, keeping my voice level. And you told Lena to change the locks during my birthday dinner. You did not ask me. You ordered it. Victoria turned to Dr. Pierce, offering a conspiratorial smile. See? This is what I mean. She interprets everything as an attack. We were going to surprise her with a security upgrade, a gift, but she ran out of the restaurant like the building was on fire. Just like Thanksgiving 2 years ago when she screamed at Daniel for dropping a spoon. My hands clenched into fists on my lap. I did not scream. I flinched. There is a difference. It was very loud. Riley, my father mumbled, staring at the carpet. I looked at him, betrayed. Dad, the spoon hit the tile floor. It sounded like a gunshot. I flinched. I apologized immediately. You were shaking for an hour, Victoria said softly, reaching out to stroke my father's arm. It is okay. Daniel, she cannot help it. It is the trauma. She looked back at Dr. Pierce. We walk on eggshells. Doctor, we truly do. We try to support her. But when she starts imagining conspiracies, like this idea that someone broke into her apartment and moved her little medals around, it is hard to know what is real for her and what is the sickness. I felt the blood rushing to my ears. She was doing it. She was taking a police crime scene, a documented event with a case number, and turning it into a symptom of my mental illness. She was erasing reality in real time. The police were there. Victoria, I said, my voice hard. There was a police report. Detective Ramirez saw the note. Victoria waved her hand dismissively. I spoke to the building manager. He said the police found nothing, no fingerprints, no forced entry, just you, panicked, insisting someone had touched your photos. It sounds like a frantic episode, Riley, and I say that with love. I looked at Dr. Pierce. She was sitting perfectly still, her face neutral. She was not defending me. She was just watching, listening. It must be very difficult, Dr. Pierce said, her voice even, to feel like your reality is being questioned, Riley. It is not her reality, Victoria corrected gently. It is her perception, and we all know her perception is damaged. We love her, but we cannot let her delusions dictate family decisions. Dr. Pierce shifted slightly. And the decision to access her apartment without her consent? Do you view that as a family decision, Mrs. Monroe? Victoria stiffened. For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. Her eyes went cold. Then, just as quickly, the warmth returned. We pay for so many things, Doctor. We have helped her so much. It feels silly to talk about consent when we are the ones keeping her afloat. I have a job, I said. I pay my own rent. With the job Daniel got you, Victoria shot back. It was fast, sharp, like a viper striking. Then she softened again. We are a team, Riley. Why do you always want to fight us? Doctor, Pierce leaned forward, just an inch. I noticed you mentioned financial support. Riley has expressed confusion about her name being associated with family business documents. Is there a reason her name would be on contracts she has not signed? The room went dead silent. Victoria's gaze snapped from me to Dr. Pierce. The concerned mother act evaporated. She looked calculating, dangerous. I do not know what she has told you, Victoria said, her voice dropping a few degrees. But business is complicated. Sometimes we put family members on boards for legacy reasons. It is standard. She glanced at the table. Her eyes locked onto the small black device with the red light. Is that thing on? Victoria asked. Her voice was sharp now. I record all my sessions for reference, Dr. Pierce said. It is in the intake paperwork Riley signed, and since this is her session you are joining, the consent extends. I am not comfortable with that, Victoria said, sitting up straighter. She smoothed her cardigan, but her fingers were digging into the fabric. I think family therapy should be private. I do not like the idea of my words being stored in some database. Please turn it off. It is standard practice, Dr. Pierce repeated. It protects everyone. It ensures there is an accurate record of what is said. so there is no confusion later. Given the differing recollections of events like the Thanksgiving dinner, I would think you would appreciate an objective record. Victoria stood up. I will not continue this conversation while that machine is recording. It feels like an interrogation, not therapy. Daniel, we are leaving. My father looked up, startled. But V, we just got here. Maybe we should... I said we are leaving, Victoria said. She did not raise her voice, but the command was absolute. She looked at Dr. Pierce with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Thank you for your time, doctor. But I think Riley needs a specialist who focuses on medication, not whatever this is. Come on. Riley, we are going. I am staying, I said. I did not move from the chair. Victoria looked at me. For a moment, I thought she might slap me right there. Her jaw worked, grinding her teeth. Fine, suit yourself, but do not expect us to pay for this hour. She turned and marched out, her heels clicking aggressively on the hardwood floor. My father gave me a helpless, apologetic look, the look of a man who knows he is a coward but has accepted his fate, and followed her. The door clicked shut. The silence rushed back into the room. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 20 minutes. I slumped in the chair, drained. I told you, I whispered. She turned it around. She made me look like the crazy one. She denied everything. Dr. Pierce picked up the recorder. She did not turn it off. She held it in her hand, weighing it. She did not deny everything, Riley. Dr. Pierce said quietly. She admitted to accessing your apartment. She admitted to the financial entanglement, however vaguely, and she reacted with extreme defensiveness to the existence of a record. Dr. Pierce looked at the door where Victoria had exited, then back at me. Her professional mask softened. Just a fraction. There was something in her eyes, a hardness, a resolve, that I recognized. It was the look of a sniper settling into a hide. People who tell the truth are rarely afraid of microphones, Dr. Pierce said. And people who are purely concerned about a family member's health do not try to isolate them from their therapist the moment the conversation turns to money. She set the recorder back down, ensuring the red light was facing us. She thinks she put on a performance of a loving mother, Dr. Pierce said. But what she actually did was show me exactly how she dismantles you. I saw the gaslighting. Riley, I saw it happen in real time. You did not imagine it. You are not crazy. I felt tears prick the back of my eyes. Hot, angry tears. It was the first time in years someone had looked at the dynamic between Victoria and me and validated my version of the war. What do we do now? I asked. Doctor, Pierce picked up her pen. Now we document everything, because she made a mistake today. She thought she could control the room. She forgot that in this room, I am the commanding officer. I stood up to leave, my legs feeling shaky but my spine straight. As I walked into the hallway, I could hear voices near the elevator. Oh, Daniel, do not be upset. I heard Victoria's voice, sweet and cloying, drifting down the corridor. I just do not think she's a good fit for Riley. She feeds into Riley's paranoia. We will find someone better, someone on our payroll. Someone in our network. I froze. Someone on our payroll. I looked back at the open door of the office. Dr. Pierce was standing there, leaning against the frame. She had heard it too. She caught my eye. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She just gave a single, sharp nod. It was an acknowledgement, an alliance. Victoria thought she had won the skirmish by storming out. She didn't realize she had just handed the enemy valuable intel. I turned and walked toward the stairs, leaving the elevator to them. I had a long way to go, but for the first time since coming home, I wasn't walking alone. 3 days after the disastrous therapy session, my phone rang while I was sitting in the communal lounge of the Veterans Housing Complex. It was Detective Cole Ramirez. He did not waste time with pleasantries. We got the invoice from the locksmith, Ramirez said. His voice sounded tinny through the speaker. You were right. It was not a personal check. The bill for the lock change on your apartment was sent to a corporate account, Northbridge Secure Solutions. I felt a cold drop of sweat slide down my spine. Northbridge Secure Solutions was my father's company, or rather, it was the company my father started, but which Victoria had been rebranding for the last 5 years. They listed it as Emergency Site Securing, Ramirez continued. Standard maintenance for a corporate asset, except your apartment is a private residence, not a corporate asset. Technically, they used company funds to break into a private home. It gets worse, doesn't it? I asked, sensing the hesitation in his voice. I did a quick background check on Northbridge, Ramirez said. Ms. Monroe, are you aware that you are listed as a senior consultant on their website? I nearly dropped the phone. I am a logistics coordinator for a completely different firm. I have never worked for Northbridge. I have never taken a dime from them. You might want to look at their About Us page, Ramirez said, and then call me back. I opened my laptop. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a second before typing in the URL. The homepage loaded in a sleek wash of navy blue and steel gray. It screamed competence and security. I clicked on the Leadership tab. There was my father's face, looking serious and dependable. Below him was Victoria, listed as Chief Financial Officer, and right next to her was me. It was a photo taken 4 years ago, right after I received my commendation. I was in my dress blues, staring stoically at the camera. Underneath my face, in bold sans serif font, it read, Sergeant Riley Monroe, Retry, Director of Veteran Outreach and Strategic Security. My stomach turned over. They had not just used my name. They had stolen my face. They had taken the one thing that belonged entirely to me, my service, and plastered it on a website to sell alarm systems and private security details. But as I dug deeper, clicking through the sitemap, I realized it was not just about selling alarm systems to suburban homes. I found a press release from 6 months ago. Northbridge Secure Solutions awarded state contract for Veteran Rehabilitation Center security. I scrolled down to the compliance section. To qualify for certain tiers of government contracts, specifically the ones set aside for diversity and veteran status, a company often needs to prove that a certain percentage of its leadership or ownership is comprised of veterans. My father never served. Victoria certainly never served. I was the diversity hire. I was the golden ticket. They were using my status as a disabled veteran to bid on contracts that they otherwise would never have qualified for. I spent the next 4 hours drowning in public records. Logistics is what I do. I know how to follow a paper trail. I know that if you move a shipping container from point A to point B, there is a manifest. Money is the same. I pulled the tax filings for a nonprofit organization linked on the Northbridge site, the Monroe Veterans Support Initiative. It sounded noble. It sounded like something I would support. The 990 tax forms were publicly available. I scanned the list of officers. There I was again, Riley Monroe, founding board member. I looked at the revenue. Last year, the charity took in $350,000 in donations. 80% of those donations came from Northbridge Secure Solutions. And then, under expenses, I saw a recurring line item, Consulting Services, VEM, Management LLC. I looked up VM Management. It was registered to a P.O. box in Tacoma. The registered agent was Victoria Monroe. The cycle was sickeningly elegant. Northbridge used my name to get government contracts. They took the profit from those contracts and donated it to a charity to get a tax write-off. The charity then paid Victoria's shell company for consulting, effectively washing the money and putting it straight into her pocket. And I was the face of it all. If this house of cards collapsed, I would not just be a witness. On paper, I was the architect. I needed air. I grabbed my jacket and drove to a small coffee shop near the university, a place where I knew Lena liked to study. I texted her, I know you are at the library. Meet me at Joe's. 5 minutes. Come alone, or I send the police to Mom. It was a bluff, but it worked. Lena walked in 10 minutes later, looking like a deer caught in headlights. She was wearing a raincoat that was too big for her, hugging a stack of textbooks to her chest. Riley, please, she whispered as she sat down. Mom is on a rampage. She says you are building a case against us. She says you are manic." "I am not manic, Lena," I said, sliding my laptop across the table. "I am thorough. Look at this." I showed her the tax documents. I showed her the Northbridge website. "Did you know?" I asked. "Did you know she was using my face to get contracts?" Lena looked at the screen, then squeezed her eyes shut. "I do not know about the contracts. I just sign what she tells me to sign." I froze. "What did you sign, Lena?" "She made me the administrative assistant for the charity," Lena confessed, her voice shaking. "She brings me stacks of papers, meeting minutes, expense reports. She says it is just formalities. She says, 'Sign here, Lena. It is just for the accountant.' I never read them. I just wanted her to stop yelling." I looked at my stepsister. I had always resented her for being the favorite, for being the one Victoria protected, but now I saw the truth. Victoria did not protect Lena. She groomed her. She had turned Lena into a human shield made of ink and paper. If the IRS came knocking, Lena's signature was on the fraudulent minutes. If the Department of Defense audited the contracts, my face was on the board. We were both just assets. I was the credibility. Lena was the liability sponge. "You need to stop signing things," I said, my voice low and urgent. "Right now, today, do not sign a birthday card if she hands it to you." Lena started to cry, silent tears tracking down her face. "She said she was doing it for us, to build a legacy." "She is building a prison sentence," I said, "and she is making sure we are the ones who serve it." I left Lena there, trembling over her latte, and drove straight to Dr. Pierce's office. I did not have an appointment, but the receptionist saw my face and buzzed me back immediately. Dr. Pierce was between sessions. She stood up when I walked in, taking in my wet hair and the frantic energy radiating off me. "Riley?" "It is not just the apartment," I said, throwing my bag on the chair. "It is my identity. They are using me. Northbridge, the charity, everything." I laid it all out for her, the website, the fake board position, the money laundering through the charity. Dr. Pierce listened, her face growing paler with every sentence. She walked over to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. "This is called stolen valor for profit," she said, turning back to me. "But it is more than that, Riley. If they are claiming you are a disabled veteran board member to get set-aside contracts, they have to provide proof." I stopped pacing. "Proof?" "Disability ratings," Dr. Pierce said. "DD 214 forms, medical letters. To get those certifications, you have to submit documentation." The realization hit me like a physical blow. "My medical records." "If you did not give them those records," Dr. Pierce said, her voice hard, "then they accessed them, or they forged your signature to request them. This is not just fraud. Riley, this is a violation of your most private self. They have likely been mining your history, your trauma, to qualify for tax breaks." "I told Detective Ramirez," I said. "He knows about the website. I have to send him the financial stuff." "Good," Dr. Pierce said. "But you need to be careful. If Victoria realizes you have found the money trail, the psychological attacks will stop being subtle. She will need to discredit you completely. She needs you to be unstable so that if you testify, no one believes you." "She already tried that," I said. "With you?" "And she failed," Dr. Pierce reminded me. My phone buzzed. It was Detective Ramirez again. "Ms. Monroe," he said. His voice was different this time, quieter, heavier. "I looked at the documents you uploaded to the secure portal, and I made a few calls." "And?" "This is out of my league," Ramirez said. "Local PD handles breaking and entering, but government contract fraud, wire fraud involving veteran charities, that is federal. I have reached out to a contact at the Inspector General's office for the Department of Defense and the FBI." "What does that mean for me?" I asked. "It means you are walking a very fine line," Ramirez warned. "You are listed on the paperwork. Until we can prove you were unaware, you are a person of interest. But the fact that you brought this to us helps. It helps a lot. Just do not tell your family. Do not tip them off that the feds are looking. Let them think this is just a dispute about a door lock. I hung up. I looked at Dr. Pierce. The FBI is getting involved, I said. Dr. Pierce nodded slowly. She walked over to her desk and picked up a file. My file. She tapped her finger against the cover. Victoria thinks this room is a place where she can spin narratives, Dr. Pierce said. She thinks therapy is just talk. She thinks she can come in here, paint you as the villain, and leave with a clear conscience. She looked me dead in the eye. If anyone believes that a therapy office is a safe harbor for hiding crimes, Dr. Pierce said, her voice sharp as a scalpel, they have severely underestimated both my profession and your ability to defend yourself. We are going to document every lie she tells, and when the time comes, this file will not be a record of your illness. It will be the evidence of her guilt. I took a deep breath. The fear was still there, buzzing under my skin, but for the first time, the anger was stronger. I was not just a daughter anymore. I was not just a victim. I was the star witness, and the prosecution was just getting started. The counteroffensive began not with a scream, but with an invitation. Victoria did not storm my apartment again. She did not send the police. Instead, she sent an email to Dr. Pierce, carbon copying my father and me. The subject line read, "Urgent family healing. Request for extended session." In the body of the email, she wrote that she was deeply concerned about my recent fixation on financial conspiracies, and that she believed it was a symptom of my untreated trauma. She offered to pay for a double session, a 2-hour block where we could lay everything on the table and get me the help I supposedly needed. It was a trap. I knew it. A blind man could see it. She sensed that I was digging into the money, into the fake charity and the government contracts, and she needed to shut it down. Her strategy was simple. Get a medical professional to declare me unstable, paranoid, and delusional. If Dr. Pierce put in my file that my accusations about fraud were just symptoms of a breakdown, any testimony I gave to the feds would be shredded in court. I was ready to delete the email and block her number, but then Dr. Pierce called me. "You need to come in alone first. Riley," she said. Her voice was different, tighter, more guarded. "Before we agree to anything, you need to see what she sent me privately." I drove to the office the next morning. It was raining again, a relentless Seattle drizzle that greased the windshield. When I sat down in the familiar armchair, Dr. Pierce slid a printed email across the low table. "This came 20 minutes before the group invitation," she said. I picked it up. It was from Victoria to Dr. Pierce, marked strictly confidential. "Dear Dr. Pierce, I feel I must warn you before we meet. Riley has been exhibiting dangerous behaviors at home that she may not be telling you about. She has been throwing things, vases, plates, when we ask simple questions. Last week, she threatened to drive her car off the bridge if we did not give her cash. We are terrified she's going to hurt herself or us. Please, help us get her committed to a facility where she can be safe. We are desperate." My hands did not shake. They went completely still. It was the stillness of a soldier realizing the enemy has breached the perimeter. "I never did any of that," I said. My voice sounded hollow to my own ears. "I have not asked them for money in 5 years. I have never threatened self-harm, not once." "I know," Dr. Pierce said. She took the paper back and placed it in a file folder, a physical folder, thick and heavy. "I have treated you for 18 months. Riley, I know your baseline. I know your triggers. This email describes a person I have never met. It describes a caricature." She leaned forward. "This is establishing a narrative. She wants me to be biased before she even walks in the door. She wants me to be afraid of you." "Is it working?" I asked. "It is working," Dr. Pierce said, her eyes hard. "But not the way she intends. I have consulted with the clinic's legal counsel and the state ethics board this morning. Given the allegations of potential violence and the conflicting accounts of reality, I have grounds to implement strict safety protocols for our next session." "What does that mean?" "It means we record everything," Dr. Pierce said. "Not just audio. I am bringing in a video setup. I told the board I need a complete, unassailable record of the interaction to protect the patient from potential gaslighting and to protect myself from liability. They agreed. I felt a cold knot in my stomach loosen just a fraction. She will never agree to a camera. She will, Dr. Pierce countered, because she thinks the camera is there to catch you exploding. She is arrogant, Riley. She believes she can perform the role of the saintly mother so perfectly that the lens will only see what she wants it to see. I left the office with my head spinning, only to have my phone buzz with a call from Detective Ramirez. "Do not talk," he said immediately. "Just listen. My contact at the Department of Defense Inspector General's office is interested, very interested. The documents you found? The board membership? It matches a pattern they have been tracking in 3 other states. So come arrest them," I said, gripping the steering wheel. "It is not that simple," Ramirez said. "White-collar crime takes time. We need to prove intent. We need to prove they knowingly defrauded the government. Not just that they made a clerical error. Their lawyers will argue it was a mistake, a miscommunication, that you verbally agreed to be on the board and then forgot." He paused, and the silence on the line was heavy. "If you go into that room with her," Ramirez said, "and she admits to using your name, if she admits she did it to get the money, that is the smoking gun. That is intent. If you can get her to say it on tape, we can bypass 2 years of forensic accounting." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You want me to wear a wire?" "No," Ramirez said. "That is inadmissible without a warrant, and we do not have probable cause for a warrant yet. But if she consents to a recording by the therapist, that is legal. That is admissible." I was being asked to walk into a cage with a tiger, armed only with a conversation. The days leading up to the session were a blur of psychological warfare. Victoria did not attack me directly. She went to the court of public opinion. My Facebook feed, which I rarely checked, started lighting up with notifications. My cousins, my aunts, people I had not seen since Christmas, were posting vague prayer hand emojis. Praying for our family during this hard time. Mental illness is a thief. So sad to watch someone you love lose their grip on reality. We are here for you. Riley, no matter what lies your mind tells you. Victoria was seeding the ground. She was telling everyone I was crazy, so that when the truth came out, that she was stealing from veterans, everyone would assume it was just another one of Riley's delusions. And my father? Silence. I drove past the house one evening, parking down the block. I saw him in the driveway, washing his car. He looked normal. He looked like a man who did not have a care in the world. He was scrubbing the rims of his Mercedes, a car bought with money that was supposed to help men and women who had lost limbs in service to their country. I realized then that his silence was worse than Victoria's lies. Victoria was a predator. That was her nature. But my father was a collaborator. He was selling me out for a quiet life and a heated leather seat. Then came the voicemail from Lena. It came at 2 a.m, her voice thick with tears and alcohol. "Riley, I can't. Mom says if the auditors come, I have to say it was you. She told me to say you forced me to sign those papers. She said if I don't, I'll go to jail and she'll lose the house. I don't want to go to jail. Riley, I'm sorry. I'm just so scared." I saved the voicemail. I backed it up to the cloud. Then I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the wall until the sun came up. They were going to feed Lena to the wolves, too. They were going to burn both their daughters to keep themselves warm. The morning of the session, the sky was a bruised purple. I drove to Dr. Pierce's office with the mechanical precision of a soldier going on patrol. I checked my mirrors. I checked my breathing. Box breathing. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. I pulled into the parking lot. Victoria's car was already there, a sleek black SUV that took up 2 spaces. I sat in my truck for a long time. My hands were shaking, not a little tremble, but a violent, uncontrollable vibration. This was not a firefight. I knew how to handle a firefight. This was my childhood, my trauma, my family, all wrapped into a weapon pointing straight at my chest. If I went in there, I was declaring war. There was no going back. If I failed, If I let her trigger me, if I screamed or threw something, she would have the evidence to commit me. She would win. But if I didn't go in, they would keep doing it. They would use my name until there was nothing left of it. They would drag Lena down with them. My phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Pierce. I am here. The equipment is set up. We have informed consent forms ready, and today, if anyone crosses a line, there will be no more silence. There will be no more victims. I looked at the text. No more victims. I thought about the guys I served with. I thought about the ones who didn't come back, and the ones who came back broken, fighting for every scrap of support the VA could give them. I thought about the money Victoria was spending on cashmere and wine. Money meant for them. The shaking in my hands stopped. It was replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I was not going in there as Riley the daughter. I was going in as Riley the witness. I opened the car door and stepped out into the rain. I locked the truck. I walked toward the building. I did not look back. The trap was set. But Victoria forgot one thing about traps. They snap shut on whoever steps on the trigger first, and I was done watching where I stepped. The air in Dr. Pierce's office was so thick with tension it felt pressurized, like the cabin of a transport plane right before a combat drop. The room was arranged differently today. The coffee table had been pulled closer to the center, and on it sat the digital recorder, not discreetly tucked away near a notebook, but positioned prominently on a small stack of books. Beside it, a small tripod held a camera, its lens cap removed, the black eye staring unblinkingly at the sofa where my family sat. Dr. Pierce stood by her desk, her posture rigid. She waited until we were all seated, Victoria and my father on the sofa. Lena perched on the edge of a side chair like a bird ready to take flight, and me in the armchair opposite them, before she spoke. Before we begin, Dr. Pierce said, her voice carrying a steeliness I had not heard before, I want to reiterate the boundaries of this session. We are recording audio and video for the safety and professional protection of everyone in this room. You have all signed the consent forms. The rule is simple. One person speaks at a time. No physical aggression, no shouting. If I feel the safety of any participant is compromised, I will terminate the session immediately and call security. Is that understood? Of course, Doctor, Victoria said. She smiled, a warm, indulgent expression that suggested Dr. Pierce was being delightfully overcautious. We are just a family trying to heal. We are not a fight club. She reached out and squeezed my father's hand. He flinched slightly, then settled into his role as the silent prop. Victoria, you requested this session, Dr. Pierce said, sitting down and pressing the record button on the device. The red light flickered to life. Why don't you start? Victoria adjusted her silk scarf, taking a moment to center herself. When she looked up, her eyes were wet with unshed tears. It was a masterclass in performance. I just want my daughter back, she began, looking not at me, but at Dr. Pierce. When Riley came back from overseas, we knew it would be hard. We prepared ourselves, but I do not think anyone can truly prepare for the darkness that comes home with them. I have spent the last 3 years trying to pull her out of the shadows. I have cooked her meals she refuses to eat. I have offered to pay for treatments she refuses to take. I have tried to be the mother she lost. But every time I reach out, she attacks. She turned to me then, her expression full of pity. Riley, honey, I know you do not mean to be cruel. I know it is the trauma talking, the paranoia, but when you accuse us of breaking into your home or stealing from you, it breaks your father's heart. We are the only people in the world who are truly on your side. My father nodded slowly, staring at the carpet. We just want you to be okay, kiddo. I felt the familiar heat rising in my chest, the urge to scream, to defend myself against this rewriting of my life. She was painting me as a rabid dog she had graciously decided not to euthanize. I looked at Lena. She was studying her cuticles, refusing to witness the slaughter. I am not paranoid, I said. My voice was quieter than I expected, but steady. And I am not confused about what is happening. This isn't about my deployment, Victoria. This is about facts. See? Victoria sighed, looking back at Dr. Pierce. Everything is a battle. She cannot just accept love. Let's talk about the facts then, I said, ignoring her emotional bait. Let's talk about the locks. You ordered them changed. That is not love. That is eviction. It was security, Victoria insisted, her voice pitching up slightly. You live in a dangerous neighborhood. I was upgrading you. And the note? I asked. The note on my table that said the truth finds its way home? Did you write that as a security upgrade too? Victoria laughed, a short, dismissive sound. I have no idea what you are talking about. That sounds like something from a bad movie, Riley. Are you sure you didn't write it yourself? Sometimes people do things for attention and then forget. She was doing it. She was rewriting reality in real time. But this time, I had ammunition. Let's talk about Northbridge Secure Solutions, I said. The room went cold. Victoria's smile didn't falter, but her eyes went dead. What about it? She asked breezily. It is the family business. It puts food on the table. Even your table. Indirectly. Why is my face on the website? I asked. Why am I listed as a director? I never signed an employment contract. I never attended a board meeting. Victoria waved her hand, as if swatting away a fly. Oh, Riley, please, it is marketing. Everyone fluffs up their About Us page. We are proud of your service. We wanted to honor you. It is not honor, Dr. Pierce interjected. Her voice was neutral, curious. Riley mentioned that there are government contracts involved, contracts that require veteran leadership. Victoria shifted in her seat. She looked at Dr. Pierce with a hint of annoyance. Business is complicated. Doctor, you have to be flexible to survive in this economy. A few contracts here and there. It is standard industry practice to leverage your assets. I am not an asset, I said, leaning forward. I am a person, and you are using my DD-214 form to qualify for federal set-asides. I found the tax records for the charity, Victoria, the Monroe Veteran Support Initiative. Victoria's face hardened. That charity does good work. It pays 80% of its income to your consulting firm, I said. And it lists me as a founding member. I never agreed to that. Why is my name on those documents? Why is the money going to your personal LLC? Victoria snapped. The mask of the grieving mother fell away, revealing the sharp, calculating shark beneath. You think money just falls from the sky? She hissed. You think we can compete with the big defense contractors without an edge? If we did not use the veteran status, we would be starving. We would be bankrupt. Dr. Pierce leaned in, her eyes locked on Victoria. So, you are saying that without Riley's specific veteran status, her name, her rank, you would not have secured those funds? Obviously, Victoria scoffed, as if explaining gravity to a toddler. Do you think the government hands out grants to 50-year-old civilians? They want the sob story. They want the wounded warrior narrative. We gave it to them. We built a whole brand around it. And Riley? Dr. Pierce asked, her voice dangerously calm. Did she sign the paperwork authorizing this use of her identity? Victoria rolled her eyes. She looked comfortable now, arrogant in her belief that this was a private, privileged conversation where she could brag about her cleverness. Doctor, in the real world, paperwork is just a formality, Victoria said, leaning back and crossing her legs. Nobody actually checks the signatures. They see Sergeant Monroe. They see the Purple Heart, and they stamp the check. It is a victimless crime. The government meets its diversity quota. We get the contract, and everyone wins. I did not win, I said. You stole my identity. We built a legacy for you, Victoria shouted, slamming her hand on the armrest. You should be thanking me. While you were moping around in therapy, crying about loud noises, I was building an empire that you will inherit one day. Who cares if I signed your name a few times? You are my daughter. What is yours is ours. I am not your daughter, I said. Please, my father spoke up. His voice was trembling. He looked pale, sweat beading on his forehead. You are saying too much. Let's just Let's move on." "No, Daniel," Victoria snapped at him. "She needs to hear this. She thinks she is so righteous. She has no idea what it takes to keep this family afloat." Dr. Pierce looked at my father. "Daniel, were you aware that your wife was signing Riley's name on federal documents without her consent?" My father looked at me, his eyes pleading. He looked like a man drowning. It is not like we were hurting anyone. The services were provided. The security guards were hired. The money went into the system. It is all one big pot, isn't it?" "The system," Dr. Pierce repeated. "You mean your wife's consulting firm?" "It is family money," Victoria interrupted, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "It pays for this house. It pays for Lena's car. It would pay for your therapy if you weren't so ungrateful. You are making a federal case out of a few signatures. It is pathetic. Riley, you are so desperate to be a victim that you are criminalizing your own inheritance." The room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. The only sound was the hum of the ventilation system and the soft whir of the camera lens adjusting focus. I looked at the recorder. The red light was steady. Victoria had just admitted to wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to defraud the government. And she had done it with a smile, calling it business. She truly believed she was untouchable. She believed that because we were in a therapy office, the laws of the outside world did not apply. She was wrong. Dr. Pierce looked down at her notes. Her hand was perfectly still, but I saw a muscle in her jaw tighten. She looked up, and her eyes were different. The empathetic listener was gone. In her place was a witness who had heard enough. "I think," Dr. Pierce said, her voice cutting through the air like a knife, "that we need to take a pause. The emotional temperature in this room is escalating to a point that is not productive." "I am fine," Victoria said, smoothing her skirt, looking triumphant. She thought she had won the argument. She thought she had bullied me into silence. "I am calling a 15-minute recess," Dr. Pierce stated firmly. She stood up. She did not look at Victoria. She walked over to the table and picked up the digital recorder. She didn't just turn it off. She pressed a series of buttons, saving the file, then checking the screen to ensure the backup was secure. Then she looked at the camera and walked over to it, checking the memory card indicator. "We will reconvene in 15 minutes, Dr. Pierce said. "I suggest everyone take a moment to breathe. Restrooms are down the hall." Victoria stood up, rolling her eyes at my father. "Drama," she whispered loudly. "Pure drama." She grabbed her purse and strutted out of the room, Daniel trailing behind her like a ghost. Lena sat frozen for a moment, then scrambled up and ran after them, avoiding my gaze. I stayed in the chair. "Doctor?" Pierce stood by the camera. She looked at me. There was no triumph in her face, only a grim professional resolve. She tapped the side of the recorder she was holding. "That," she whispered, "was very clear." I nodded. My heart was pounding against my ribs, but for the first time in years, it wasn't from fear, it was from the adrenaline of the kill shot. She had walked right into it. She had confessed everything, believing her arrogance was a shield. She didn't know the shield was made of glass, and she had just handed us a hammer. The break was not peaceful. From my seat in the armchair, I could see through the partially open door into the hallway. Victoria had intercepted Dr. Pierce before the therapist could even reach the break room. I could not hear every word, but I knew the body language. Victoria was leaning in close, her hand resting on Dr. Pierce's forearm, a gesture that looked affectionate but was actually a vice grip. She was smiling. That tight, practiced smile she used when she was trying to return an expensive dress she had already worn. I strained to listen. The hum of the building's ventilation system fought against me, but Victoria's voice had a way of cutting through ambient noise. "Surely," I heard her say, the pitch slightly higher than normal. "We can agree that the first half of the session was unproductive, emotionally charged. I would be happy to make a significant donation to the clinic's expansion fund if we could just reset, start fresh, wipe the slate clean." My stomach turned. She was trying to buy the deletion. She knew she had confessed to fraud, and now she was trying to bribe a medical professional to erase the evidence. Dr. Pierce stepped back, physically removing Victoria's hand from her arm. Her voice was not a whisper. It was a clear, projected tone that carried right into the room where I sat. "Mrs. Monroe," Dr. Pierce said, "medical records are legal documents. Altering or destroying them to conceal admissions of criminal activity is not only a violation of my ethics board's code, but it could also be construed as obstruction of justice. I suggest we return to the room and finish the session." Victoria's face went rigid. For a second, looking at her profile, I saw pure, unadulterated rage. Her jaw unclenched, and she smoothed her hair, composing herself before turning back toward the door. She thought she could just pivot. She thought she could walk back in and bully the narrative back into submission. She marched into the room, my father trailing behind her like a shadow. She did not sit down. She stood behind the sofa, gripping the back of it with white-knuckled hands. "You are enjoying this, aren't you?" Victoria said. She was looking directly at me. The mask was gone. There was no concerned mother anymore, just the predator. "I am not enjoying anything, Victoria," I said. "I just want the truth." "The truth?" She laughed, a harsh barking sound. "The truth is that you are a broken thing. Riley, you came back from that desert with your brain scrambled, and you have been a burden on this family ever since. We gave you a job you were not qualified for. We gave you a title you did not earn, and this is how you repay us? By dragging us into this little room to play detective?" Dr. Pierce entered the room and moved quickly to her chair, checking the camera. "Victoria, please sit down. We need to maintain a respectful tone." Victoria ignored her. She walked around the sofa, moving into the center of the room. She was encroaching on my space. I could smell her perfume, gardenias, and something metallic, like fear. "You think you are so special because you wore a uniform," Victoria sneered, taking another step toward me. "But look at you. You are nearly 30 years old, sitting in a therapist's office, crying because your daddy doesn't pay enough attention to you. You are pathetic. You have no husband, no children, no real career. Just this sickness." I felt my heart rate spike. It wasn't the insults that triggered me. I had heard them all before. It was the proximity. She was standing 3 feet away, towering over me while I sat. My training told me to stand up, to neutralize the threat, but another part of me, the part that had lived in her house for 10 years, froze. I remembered the times in the kitchen when a discussion about dirty dishes would end with a sudden shove against the refrigerator. I remembered the slap on my 25th birthday because I bought the wrong kind of wine. I pressed my back into the chair, trying to put distance between us. "You are projecting—" "Victoria," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "You are scared because you got caught." "Caught?" She stepped closer. She was right in front of me now. "Who is going to catch me? You? You are a mental patient. Riley, you have a file an inch thick saying you are unstable. Who is a judge going to believe? The successful businesswoman who runs a security empire, or the paranoid veteran who thinks people are breaking into her apartment?" "Victoria, stop," Dr. Pierce commanded. She was standing up now, moving out from behind her desk. "You are violating the physical boundaries of this session. Step back." Victoria did not step back. She leaned down, her face inches from mine. "You are a traitor," she hissed. "You are a leech. You take our money. You take our support, and then you bite the hand that feeds you. You are just like your mother was. Weak." That was the line. "Do not talk about my mother," I said, starting to rise from the chair. It happened in a blur. As I stood up, Victoria's hand lashed out. It wasn't a theatrical slap. It was a vicious, open-handed strike across my face. The sound cracked through the room like a pistol shot. The force of it knocked my head to the side, and my ears started ringing immediately. I stumbled back, losing my balance as my legs hit the edge of the chair. Victoria didn't stop. She shoved me hard in the chest. "Sit down!" she screamed. I fell back into the armchair. The wind knocked out of me. Before I could recover, she kicked my shin, a sharp, targeted kick with the point of her designer heel. Pain exploded up my leg. And then she laughed. It was the most chilling sound I had ever heard. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It was a laugh of pure dominance. She stood over me, looking down at me, clutching my face, and she threw her head back. "Look at you," she crowed. "Look at the big brave soldier, cowering in a chair because her stepmommy got mad. This is what you call abuse? This is discipline, Riley. This is what happens when children don't know their place. You are a joke. Stop crying and grow up." I wasn't crying. My eyes were watering from the sting of the slap, but I wasn't crying. "Security!" Dr. Pierce shouted. She had already pressed a panic button under her desk and was now on her cell phone. Her voice urgent. "I need security to Office 3B immediately. Assault in progress. Call 911. Dr. Pierce moved physically between us, using her own body as a shield. She held her hands up, palms out. "Victoria, back away. Now. Do not touch her again." Victoria stepped back, but she didn't look afraid. She looked exhilarated. She smoothed her blouse, breathing hard, a flush of color high on her cheeks. She looked at Dr. Pierce with a smirk. "Oh, relax, doctor," Victoria said, waving a hand dismissively. "It is a family dispute. She got in my face. I defended myself. It is her word against mine. And we both know whose word carries weight in this town." She looked at my father, who was sitting on the sofa, his face buried in his hands, weeping silently. "Get up, Daniel. We are leaving. This therapy is obviously a waste of money." I sat up straight in the chair. My cheek was throbbing, heat radiating from the skin where her hand had connected. My shin was screaming in pain, but my mind was crystal clear. The ringing in my ear faded, replaced by a cold, sharp silence. I stood up. I stepped around Dr. Pierce. "Riley, stay back," Dr. Pierce warned, her hand on my shoulder. "I am not going to touch her," I said. My voice was frighteningly calm. It sounded like it belonged to someone else. I looked Victoria dead in the eye. She was still smiling, that arrogant, untouchable smile. She thought she had just put me in my place. She thought this was just another Tuesday night in the kitchen where she could hit me and then tell my father I had tripped. "You think it is your word against mine," I said softly. Victoria rolled her eyes. "It is, and you are the one with the PTSD diagnosis. Nobody believes the crazy girl, Riley." I pointed a steady finger toward the coffee table. "Are you sure about that?" I asked. "Are you absolutely sure you want to bet your freedom on that? Right in the middle of a room belonging to a mandated reporter who has been recording audio and video from the moment you walked in." Victoria froze. The smile didn't slide off her face. It shattered. Her eyes snapped to the coffee table. The little red light on the digital recorder was steady, unblinking. Then her eyes moved to the tripod, to the black lens of the camera. The little green recording indicator was glowing. The silence that filled the room was heavy enough to crush bones. Victoria's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at the camera, then at Dr. Pierce, then back at the camera. The realization hit her in waves. She hadn't just confessed to fraud on tape. She had just committed assault and battery. She had mocked a disabled veteran. She had laughed while kicking me, and every single pixel, every single decibel, had been captured in high definition. She turned to Dr. Pierce, her face draining of color until she looked like a corpse. "You," Victoria stammered, "you cannot. That is private. That is medical privacy." Dr. Pierce stood tall, her phone still clutched in her hand. She looked like an avenging angel in a blazer. "Privacy laws protect the patient, Mrs. Monroe," Dr. Pierce said, her voice hard as granite. "They do not protect the perpetrator of a crime committed in my office. For the safety of my patient, and in accordance with state law regarding the reporting of violence, I have the right and the legal obligation to preserve all evidence of what just occurred." Victoria let out a sound that was half gasp, half scream. "Delete it! I demand you delete it! It was an accident! I slipped!" "You laughed," I said. "You hit me, you kicked me, and you laughed. That wasn't a slip. Victoria, that was a performance, and you just gave the performance of a lifetime." Heavy footsteps thundered down the hallway. The door burst open. 2 uniformed building security guards rushed in, looking from me to Victoria. "Everything okay, doctor?" one of them asked, hand on his belt. "Please detain this woman for the police," Dr. Pierce said, pointing at Victoria. "She has assaulted a patient. The police are on their way." Victoria looked around wildly, like a trapped animal. She looked at Daniel, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. She looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in her eyes. Real, primal fear. "Daniel!" she screamed. "Do something! Tell them! It was an accident!" My father looked up. He looked at the red mark blooming on my cheek. He looked at the camera, and he did nothing. He just closed his eyes. I watched as the security guards moved toward her. I watched the realization sink in that her money, her influence, her manipulation, none of it could erase the last 5 minutes. She had thrown the punch, but the recording was the knockout. The arrival of the Seattle Police Department was not the chaotic, siren-blaring affair I had seen in movies. It was efficient, clinical, and humiliatingly public. 2 officers stood by the door, their radios crackling with static that sounded like distant gunfire. Victoria was still trying to salvage the wreckage of her image, even as the officer pulled her hands behind her back. "This is ridiculous," she hissed, her voice pitched high enough to be heard, but low enough to sound like a plea. "My daughter is having a mental health episode. I was trying to restrain her. Look at her. She is the one who is violent." The officer, a woman with tired eyes and a no-nonsense bun, did not look impressed. She turned to me. "Ma'am, can you look at me?" I lifted my chin. The skin on my left cheek felt tight and hot. When the officer shined her flashlight on my face, I winced. Significant redness and swelling on the left zygomatic arch, the officer recited for her body camera. She looked at my arm, where Victoria had grabbed me earlier. Bruising forming on the upper right bicep. "She did that to herself," Victoria shouted, losing her composure. "She is crazy. Ask her father. Daniel, tell them." My father was standing near the window, looking like he wanted to dissolve into the drywall. He looked at Victoria, then at the police, then at Dr. Pierce. He started, his voice cracking. It happened really fast. "Officer," Dr. Pierce cut in, her voice calm and authoritative. "I am Dr. Naomi Pierce. I am the owner of this practice. I witnessed the entire altercation. Mrs. Monroe struck the patient across the face, shoved her into the chair, and kicked her while she was seated. The patient did not retaliate, and I have the entire incident captured on high-definition video and audio." Victoria stopped struggling. The color drained from her face so completely she looked gray. The existence of the recording was the final nail, and she knew it. As they led her out, passing the reception desk where shocked patients were staring over their magazines, my father finally moved. He rushed toward me, stopping just short of touching my arm. "Riley," he pleaded, his eyes darting to the officers. "You have to stop this. You have to tell them you do not want to press charges. If they take her in, it hits the papers, the business, the reputation. We cannot survive this." I looked at him, really looked at him, for 30 years. I had seen him as a victim of Victoria's strength, a man who just wanted peace. But now, seeing him beg me to cover up an assault just to save his company's stock value, I realized he wasn't a victim. He was an accomplice. "This is not a family dispute, Dad," I said. My voice was raspy. "This is assault. And frankly, considering what is on that tape about the contracts, the assault is going to be the least of your problems." "Riley, please," he whispered, desperation leaking out of him. "She is your mother." "She is my stepmother," I corrected. "And I am not a frightened little girl anymore. hiding in my room, waiting for you to come save me. I am an adult, and today, I am choosing to protect the truth, since you never chose to protect me." I turned my back on him. I walked over to Dr. Pierce, who was handing a USB drive to the lead officer. "Make sure that gets to Detective Cole Ramirez," Dr. Pierce said. "He will want to see the assault, but he is going to be very interested in the conversation that happened 5 minutes before it." By the time I got back to my temporary room at the veteran housing complex, my phone was blowing up. Detective Cole Ramirez had already watched the footage. "I have seen a lot of things," Ramirez told me over the phone an hour later. "But watching her laugh after she kicked you, that takes a special kind of malice." "Did you hear the rest?" I asked, holding an ice pack to my cheek. "We heard it," Ramirez confirmed. "My contact at the Federal Bureau has the file now. They are less interested in the slap, and very interested in her admission that she used your veteran status to get the edge on those contracts. She basically confessed to conspiracy to defraud the government. She called it a victimless crime on tape." "What happens now?" "Now the gears start turning," Ramirez said. "But these are big gears. Riley, they grind slow. You need to sit tight." But sitting tight was not an option. The next morning, I received an email from my employer, the legitimate logistics company I worked for. The subject line was administrative notice, because my name was publicly listed as a director for Northbridge Secure Solutions, and Northbridge was now flagged in a preliminary federal inquiry. My own company's compliance software had red-flagged me. "Effective immediately, you are placed on paid administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation into your undisclosed conflict of interest and potential involvement in external corporate fraud." I stared at the screen. I was the whistleblower. I was the victim. But on paper, I was just another co-conspirator. Victoria had managed to taint the one thing I had built for myself: my career. I was stuck in a gray zone, suspended between innocence and guilt, waiting for men in suits to decide which version of the story was true. 2 days later, Dr. Pierce called me into her office, not for a session, but for a debrief. She looked tired. There were dark circles under her eyes, but she sat with the same upright posture as always. "I had a meeting with the clinic's legal team and the ethics board representative this morning," she told me. "Are you in trouble?" I asked, guilt washing over me. "For recording her?" "Victoria's lawyer tried to file a complaint within hours of her arrest," Dr. Pierce said with a faint smile. "They claimed I entrapped her. They claimed I violated HIPAA by handing the tape to the police." And the board shut them down," she said. "I reminded them of the duty to warn and duty to report statutes. When a patient is in immediate physical danger, or when a crime is committed on the premises, confidentiality is waived. The recording stands. My license stands." She slid a notebook across the desk to me. It was a fresh one, the cover stark black. "This is your homework," she said. "I am shifting roles. Riley, I cannot just be your therapist right now. I am a witness in your case, so I need you to start thinking like a witness, not just a daughter." "What do I do?" "You document everything," she instructed. "Every text message Victoria sent you in the last 5 years. Every time your father asked you to sign something without reading it. Every time you noticed money missing, you write down dates, times, locations. If we go to trial, they will try to paint you as an emotional, vindictive child. We need to show them you are a meticulous, credible observer." I took the notebook. It felt heavy in my hands. It felt like a weapon. That evening, I got a text from a burner number. "Starbucks on 4th, back corner, alone, please." I knew it was Lena. I parked 3 blocks away and walked, checking my reflection in store windows to make sure I wasn't being followed. When I got to the coffee shop, Lena was huddled in the back booth, wearing a hoodie pulled low over her face. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. "She is out on bail," Lena whispered as soon as I sat down. "Dad paid the bond, $100,000. He put the lake house up as collateral." "I figured," I said. "He wouldn't let her sit in a cell." "It is not about love, Riley," Lena said. shaking her head frantically. "I heard him on the phone with the corporate lawyer. Dad is terrified. He is trying to figure out how to spin this."
Spin what? The assault?
No. The money, Lena said. She leaned in closer, her eyes wide with fear. The lawyer told him that if they can prove Victoria went rogue, that she acted alone, that she manipulated the board minutes without his knowledge, then maybe, just maybe, he can save the company. He is going to throw her to the wolves. Riley. He is planning to testify that she deceived him too.
I sat back, stunned. My father, the man who had stood by silently while his wife abused his daughter, was now plotting to sacrifice that same wife to save his own skin. It was a level of cowardice that was almost impressive.
"And you?" I asked Lena. "What happens to you?" "They are going to say I was incompetent," Lena sobbed quietly. "That I was just an assistant who didn't know what I was signing. Dad said it is better if I look stupid than if I look guilty." "Lena," I said, reaching across the table to grab her hand. Her skin was ice cold. "You need to get your own lawyer. Do not use Dad's lawyer. Do not use the company lawyer. If Dad is willing to sacrifice Victoria, do not think for a second he won't sacrifice you to keep himself out of prison." Lena looked at me, tears streaming down her face. "Why are you helping me? I stood there. I watched her hit you. I never did anything." "Because I know what it is like to be used by them," I said. "And because, unlike them, I don't eat my own." The call came 4 days later. The number on my caller ID was from the District of Columbia area code. "Ms. Monroe?" The voice was male, deep, and professional. "This is Special Agent Harris with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, White Collar Crimes Division. I am working in conjunction with the Department of Defense Inspector General." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Yes, Agent, I have been expecting your call." "We have reviewed the evidence provided by Detective Ramirez and Dr. Pierce," Agent Harris said. "The recording is compelling, but audio is only one piece of the puzzle. We have subpoenaed the bank records for Northbridge and the charity. It looks like a classic laundering scheme. Ms. Monroe, and your name is all over the founding documents."
"I know," I said. "I never signed them. Or if I did, I was misled about what they were."
"We are inclined to believe you," Harris said. "The handwriting analysis on the bank signature cards is already showing discrepancies. It looks like a cut-and-paste job. However, to make this stick, to take down the whole structure and ensure they don't just pay a fine and walk away, we need a cooperating witness, someone who can speak to the pattern of behavior, someone who can stand in front of a grand jury and explain how the family dynamic was used to facilitate the fraud." He paused. The line hummed with the weight of the question coming next. "Ms. Monroe," Harris said, "we are preparing to bring an indictment against Victoria Monroe and Daniel Monroe for conspiracy, wire fraud, and theft of government funds. Are you willing to go on the record? Are you willing to testify against your parents in federal court?" I looked out the window of my small room. The rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking, revealing a sliver of cold. Hard moon. I thought about the slap. I thought about the fake charity. I thought about the soldiers who needed help and got nothing because my stepmother needed a new Mercedes. I thought about my father, ready to betray anyone to save his comfort. "They are not my parents," I said into the phone. "They are suspects. And yes, Agent Harris, I am ready to testify." Victoria wore white to the preliminary hearing. Of course she did. She sat at the defense table next to her attorney, a man named Sterling who cost $800 an hour and smelled of sandalwood and loopholes. She looked fragile, diminished, clutching a tissue in her hand like a talisman of innocence. If you did not know she had kicked me while I was down less than a week ago, you would have wanted to offer her a cup of tea. I sat in the gallery behind the prosecution table. I was not wearing white. I was wearing a charcoal suit that felt like armor. My cheek was still a shade of yellowish green where the bruising was fading. But I did not cover it with makeup. Let the judge see the map of her affection. This hearing was not about guilt or innocence yet. It was about the tape. Specifically, it was about whether the recording Dr. Pierce made, the recording that captured both the assault and the confession of fraud, could be played for a jury. If Sterling could get it thrown out, the case against Victoria would crumble into a he said, she said domestic dispute. If the tape stayed in, she was finished. Sterling stood up to address Judge Holloway. He had a voice like poured honey, smooth and coating everything in a layer of sticky persuasion. "Your Honor," Sterling began, "we are looking at a gross violation of privacy. My client entered Dr. Pierce's office with the reasonable expectation of medical confidentiality. Instead, she was lured into a trap. This so-called therapist set up a surveillance operation to entrap a grieving mother. To allow this recording into evidence would be to tell every patient in America that their doctor is actually a spy for the government. He was good. I felt a ripple of unease go through the room. He was turning the perpetrator into the victim of a surveillance state. But the Assistant United States Attorney, a sharp woman named Ms. Chen, who had replaced the initial prosecutor, stood up. "The expectation of privacy ends the moment a crime is committed, Your Honor," Ms. Chen said. "And we are not just talking about the physical assault on Miss Monroe. We are talking about the admission of a federal crime, conspiracy to defraud the Department of Defense. You cannot use HIPAA as a shield for felony conduct." Judge Holloway adjusted his glasses. "Call your first witness." "Doctor?" Pierce took the stand. She looked exactly as she always did, composed, professional, unshakable. She stated her name and credentials with the precision of a metronome. Sterling approached the witness stand like a wolf circling a stray sheep. "Dr. Pierce," he said, "did you inform Mrs. Monroe that you were recording video that day?" "I did," Dr. Pierce replied. "Did she sign a consent form for video?" "Riley Monroe signed the consent form," Dr. Pierce said. "Mrs. Monroe was verbally informed. I pointed out the camera. I pointed out the audio recorder. I stated clearly, 'I am recording this session for safety and professional documentation,'" Mrs. Monroe replied. "Of course," and then proceeded to speak. "But she was under duress," Sterling argued, turning to the judge. "She was emotional. She was worried about her stepdaughter. Can a mother truly give consent when she is in such a state of distress? She seemed perfectly lucid when she was detailing how she manipulated government contracts," Dr. Pierce said dryly. Sterling flinched, but recovered quickly. "Objection. Non-responsive." "Sustained," the judge said, though he looked interested. "Dr. Pierce," Sterling continued, "is it not true that you had already been in contact with law enforcement prior to this session? That you were acting as an agent of the police?" "I had consulted with legal counsel regarding my duty to report," Dr. Pierce corrected him. "I was not acting as an agent of the police. I was acting as a clinician protecting her patient from a documented pattern of abuse. When Mrs. Monroe struck Riley, the recording ceased to be a medical record and became evidence of a crime in progress." Sterling tried to rattle her for another 20 minutes. He asked about her license. He asked about her bias. He asked if I was her favorite patient. Dr. Pierce batted away every accusation with facts, dates, and policy numbers. She was a fortress. Then it was Ms. Chen's turn. "Your Honor," Ms. Chen said, "the government asks that we play the relevant portion of the recording in question. To determine if there is a reasonable expectation of privacy, the court must understand the nature of the interaction." The judge nodded. "Proceed." The courtroom was silent. The clerk pressed a button. Victoria's voice filled the high-ceilinged room. It was amplified, crisp and clear. "If we did not use the veteran status, we would be starving. We would be bankrupt." I saw Victoria stiffen at the defense table. She stared straight ahead. "Do you think the government hands out grants to 50-year-old civilians? They want the sob story. We gave it to them." The arrogance in her voice was palpable. It wasn't the voice of a distressed mother. It was the voice of a CEO bragging about a merger. Then came the sound of the chair scraping, my voice, telling her to stop, and then the slap. It sounded louder in the courtroom than it had in the office. It was a sharp, wet crack that made the stenographer jump. Then the shuffling the thud of my body hitting the chair,
And then the laugh. It echoed off the mahogany walls, that cruel, dismissive, triumphant laugh.
"Look at you! Look at the big brave soldier!" Cowering in a chair because her stepmommy got mad. I looked at the judge. His face was unreadable, but his hand had stopped writing. He was listening to the cruelty. He was listening to a woman mocking the very trauma she had claimed to be trying to heal. This is what happens when children do not know their place. The tape cut off. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It stripped Victoria of her white suit and her tissue. It laid her bare. But Sterling was not done. He had one card left to play, and it was the one I had been dreading. "Your Honor," Sterling said, his voice grave. "While the audio is unfortunate, it paints an incomplete picture. The prosecution wants to paint Riley Monroe as a victim of identity theft. They claim she knew nothing about these contracts. They claim her name was used without her permission."
He walked back to his table and picked up a thick file.
"I have here the signatory pages for the 3 largest Northbridge contracts," Sterling said, waving the papers. "And right next to the line for Director of Veteran Affairs, there is a signature that matches Riley Monroe's driver's license, a signature she has used on her lease, her tax returns, and her enlistment papers." He turned to look at me. "The defense contends that Ms. Monroe is not a victim. She is a disgruntled co-conspirator. She signed these documents, she took the benefits, and now that the heat is on, she is turning on her mother to cut a deal with the government. This recording isn't evidence of a crime against her. It is evidence of her own complicity."
A murmur went through the courtroom. I felt the eyes of the press on the back of my neck. "Ms. Monroe," the judge said, looking at me. "Take the stand."
I walked to the witness box. My legs felt heavy, but my mind was clear. I knew this was coming. Dr. Pierce had warned me.
"Ms. Monroe,"
Sterling asked, placing the document in front of me. "Is that your signature?" I looked at the paper. It was my name. It was my loop on the R and the sharp cross on the T. "It looks like my signature," I said.
"So you signed it?"
"No," I said firmly. "I did not."
"You are under oath," Sterling warned.
"Perjury is a felony. You are telling this court that a signature that looks exactly like yours appears on a document you claim you never saw?" "That is exactly what I'm saying," I replied. "Because I was deployed in Syria on the date this document was signed, February 12, 2021. I was on a transport plane from Doha. I did not have access to a printer, let alone a corporate boardroom in Tacoma." Sterling paused. He hadn't checked the dates against my service record. "Furthermore," I continued, looking at the judge, "I recall signing a power of attorney for my father before I deployed. For emergencies, I believe my signature was lifted from that document." "Ms. Chen stood up. "The government calls Special Agent Harris's forensic document examiner, Dr. Eris Thorne." Dr. Thorne was a small man with thick glasses and a demeanor that suggested he preferred paper to people. He set up a projector. "We analyzed the signatures on the Northbridge contracts," Dr. Thorne explained, pointing to a blown-up image on the screen. "At first glance, they appear genuine. However, when we overlay the signatures from 3 different contracts, signed months apart, we see something interesting." He clicked a button. The 3 signatures slid over each other on the screen. "They are identical," Dr. Thorne said. "Not just similar, identical, down to the pixel, down to the microscopic tremor in the ink line." He turned to the judge. "Human beings do not sign their name exactly the same way twice. There is always natural variation. The angle, the pressure, the speed. The fact that these 3 signatures match perfectly indicates that they are digital copies. A high-resolution scan of a legitimate signature was created, turned into a transparent image file, and stamped onto these PDFs." He clicked another slide. "We also found digital artifacts around the signature line, faint pixelation that suggests the image was pasted onto the document, not written with a pen. This is a cut-and-paste job, Your Honor, and a lazy one at that." Sterling sank back into his chair. His co-conspirator narrative had just evaporated. Judge Holloway looked at Victoria. She was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was looking at the exit sign. "The court is ready to rule," Judge Holloway said. He shuffled his papers, taking a moment to organize his thoughts. "The defense argues that Mrs. Monroe had an expectation of privacy," the judge began. "However, the court finds that Mrs. Monroe was informed of the recording. Furthermore, the court agrees with the prosecution that the privilege does not extend to the commission of a crime. The recording clearly captures an assault, but more importantly for the federal charges, it captures a discussion of ongoing fraud." He looked over his glasses at Sterling. "The tape is admissible," the judge ruled. "In its entirety, the assault, the confession, the laughter, the jury will hear all of it. The motion to suppress is denied." The gavel banged. It wasn't a loud sound, but it felt like a thunderclap. Victoria's face went past pale and turned the color of ash. She turned to Sterling, whispering frantically, grabbing his sleeve. But Sterling was already packing up his briefcase. He knew a sinking ship when he saw one. My father, who had been sitting in the back row, put his head in his hands. He knew what this meant. The tape proved he was there. It proved he knew. It proved he did nothing. As the bailiff called for "all rise," I looked across the room at Dr. Pierce. She was standing near the prosecution table, gathering her purse. She caught my eye. She didn't smile. This wasn't a happy moment. It was a grim, necessary surgery. But she gave me a single, slow nod. It was a confirmation. You stood your ground. You told the truth. And now, the record is permanent. I walked out of the courtroom into the hallway. The air felt different. For years, Victoria had controlled the narrative. She had controlled the money, the family, the truth. She had made me doubt my own sanity. But as I walked past her legal team, arguing in hushed, panicked tones near the water fountain, I realized something. She had lost the one thing she needed most. She had lost the dark. The lights were on now, and there was nowhere left for her to hide. The federal courtroom was a study in mahogany and silence. It smelled of floor wax and old paper, a sterile scent that was a world away from the perfume and wine of that birthday dinner in Tacoma. I sat in the front row, my hands clasped loosely in my lap. I was not wearing a uniform. I was not wearing the dress blues Northbridge Secure Solutions had stolen for their website. I was wearing a simple gray suit. I was just Riley Monroe, citizen, veteran, and witness. On the defense side, Victoria sat stiffly. Her hair was still perfect, but the light in her eyes had dimmed. She looked smaller, contained by the physical boundaries of the table and the legal boundaries of the charges against her. Beside her, at a separate table, because their defenses had fractured weeks ago, sat my father, Daniel. He refused to look at her. He refused to look at me. He stared at the water pitcher on his table as if it contained the secrets of the universe. The charges were heavy: conspiracy to defraud the United States government, wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and tacked onto the end like a grim punctuation mark, assault within a medical facility. The Assistant United States Attorney, Ms. Chen, did not waste time with theatrical speeches. She simply pressed play. For the third time in this legal process, the sound of Dr. Pierce's office filled the room, but this time, it was not a preliminary hearing. It was the main event. The jury, 12 strangers with serious faces, leaned in. They heard the arrogance first. They heard Victoria bragging about using the wounded warrior narrative to get contracts. They heard her dismiss my service as a marketing tool. And then, they heard the violence. The slap cracked through the courtroom speakers, sharp and vicious, the scuffle of the chair, the dull thud of a kick. And then, the laughter. I watched the jury. A woman in the back row flinched. A man in the front crossed his arms and glared at Victoria. It was that laughter, cruel, dismissive, stripping away any pretense of maternal discipline, that sealed the room's mood. It was the sound of a predator playing with food, not a mother correcting a child. When I took the stand, I felt a calmness I hadn't felt in years. I recounted the timeline with military precision. I told them about the birthday dinner, the whisper about the locks, the envelope on my table, and the discovery that my name, my identity, had been monetized without my consent. Mrs. Monroe's defense claims this was a family matter. Ms. Chen asked me, standing near the jury box, that this was a form of tough love for a troubled daughter. How do you respond to that? I looked directly at Victoria. She was glaring at me, trying to summon the old intimidation, but it didn't work. The glass wall of the witness box protected me. I am 29 years old, I said, my voice clear. I am a combat veteran. I pay my own rent. I have a job. There is no version of reality where a stepmother changing the locks on my apartment and forging my signature on federal contracts is tough love. And there is no version of reality where kicking an adult woman in a therapist's office is parenting. It is abuse, and it was done to keep me silent about the money. My father was next, and that was the moment the last of the family illusion crumbled. Daniel Monroe. Under the crushing weight of the financial evidence Detective Ramirez and the FBI had compiled, had taken a plea deal. He took the stand not to defend his wife, but to bury her. It was Victoria's idea, he said, his voice shaking. He looked pathetic, a man who had traded his dignity for a quiet life and was now losing both. She said we needed an edge. She said Riley wasn't using her status, so why shouldn't we? I just signed what she put in front of me. I wanted to protect the company. You wanted to protect the company, the prosecutor repeated dryly. But you did not want to protect your daughter when your wife was assaulting her? Daniel lowered his head. I was afraid, he whispered. Victoria, she manages everything. I just wanted it to stop. It was a confession of cowardice that sucked the air out of the room. He admitted to the fraud to save himself from the maximum sentence, but in doing so, he revealed the rot at the core of our home. He wasn't the kindly father baffled by his wife's ambition. He was the silent partner who enjoyed the heated seats of his Mercedes while his daughter was gaslit into believing she was insane. Victoria took the stand in her own defense. It was a Hail Mary pass. She tried to cry. She tried to paint herself as the victim of a complex regulatory system and an ungrateful stepdaughter. I did it for this family, she cried, gripping the railing. The system is rigged against small businesses. We needed those contracts to survive. And Riley, she was so broken when she came back. I thought if I gave her a title, a purpose, she would feel better. I was trying to give her a legacy. Mrs. Monroe, Ms. Chen said, stepping forward. You say you were trying to help her. You say you love her. I do, Victoria sobbed. I love her like my own. Then why? Ms. Chen asked, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. Did you laugh when you kicked her? Why did you tell her adults handle their own problems while you were physically assaulting her? Victoria opened her mouth, then closed it. The silence stretched. She looked at the jury, but there was no sympathy there. She looked at the judge. Nothing. The sound of her own laughter on the tape was a ghost she could not exorcise. She stammered. I was stressed. It was a reaction. It was a reaction of contempt. Ms. Chen said, no further questions. Doctor, Pierce was the final nail. She testified not just as a witness to the assault, but as an expert on the dynamics of control. She explained to the jury how Victoria had used my PTSD diagnosis as a weapon, weaponizing the very thing I sought help for to discredit me. It is a common tactic, Dr. Pierce explained to the hushed room, to label the victim as unstable or paranoid, so that when they finally speak the truth about the abuse or the theft, no one believes them. It is not just lying. It is a systematic dismantling of the victim's reality. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood up. Guilty, he read, on all counts. The judge's sentencing was swift and severe. Because of the involvement of government funds and the exploitation of a veteran's status, the guidelines were harsh. Victoria Monroe, the judge said, looking down from the bench, you treated your stepdaughter not as a person, but as a commodity. You stole her valor to line your pockets, and when she questioned you, you responded with violence and psychological torment. You are sentenced to 84 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. My father received 36 months for his role in the conspiracy. Northbridge Secure Solutions was ordered to be dissolved, its assets seized to pay restitution to the Department of Defense. The lake house, the cars, the accounts, everything was gone. As the marshals moved in to handcuff Victoria, the courtroom erupted in the low murmur of the gallery clearing out. I stood up. I didn't look away. I watched the metal click around her wrists. As they led her past the prosecution table, she stopped. She looked at me. Her face was a mask of pure venom. "You will regret this," she whispered, her voice a ragged hiss. "You destroyed this family. I was the only mother you had left." I looked her in the eye. I didn't flinch. I didn't shake. "You are not my mother," I said, my voice steady enough for the nearby deputies to hear. "You are my father's wife. You didn't give birth to me, and you taught me one thing. Victoria, adults take responsibility for their actions. Enjoy yours." She was shoved forward by the marshal, disappearing through the side door. Outside the courthouse, the rain had stopped. The gray clouds over Seattle were breaking apart. A cluster of reporters was waiting at the bottom of the steps, microphones raised like spears. "Riley, Ms. Monroe, do you have a comment?" "Is this revenge?" one reporter shouted. "Did you do this to get back at your stepmother?" I stopped. I looked at the cameras. I thought about the wounded warrior narrative she had sold. "This is not a story about a daughter taking revenge," I said, speaking clearly into the microphones. "This is a story about an adult refusing to let her name be used as a tool for wrongdoings one more time. Justice isn't revenge. It is just the truth finally coming home." I walked through the crowd, got into my truck, and drove away. 2 weeks later. The office was quiet. The abstract art on the walls was the same. The sage green paint was the same, but the room felt different. The tripod was gone. The video camera was gone. The digital recorder was tucked away in a drawer, no longer the centerpiece of the room. I sat in the armchair. Dr. Pierce sat opposite me. She wasn't wearing her witness blazer. She was wearing a soft cardigan. We sat in silence for a long moment. It wasn't the heavy, pressurized silence of the investigation. It was a clean silence. The silence of a room that had been scrubbed of toxins. "The assets are being liquidated," I said. "Lena is moving into a small apartment. She is cooperating with the trustees. She is going to be okay. I think she finally has to get a real job." "And you?" Dr. Pierce asked. "My suspension was lifted," I said. "The company cleared me once the verdict came down. I go back to logistics on Monday." "Doctor?" Pierce nodded. She picked up her notepad, but she didn't write anything. She just held it. "We have spent the last few months fighting a war," Dr. Pierce said. "A war for your credibility, for your name, for your safety. That war is over. The enemy has been neutralized." She looked at me with a soft smile. "So," she asked, "what do you want to work on today? No courts, no lawyers, no stepmothers?" I looked out the window at the skyline. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, my chest expanded fully. There was no weight there, no fear of the next phone call, no dread of the next dinner invitation. "I want to talk about the future," I said, turning back to her. I smiled, and it felt genuine. "This time, it is not about them anymore. It is about how I am going to live now that there is no one left to control the keys to my life." Dr. Pierce uncapped her pen. "That," she said, "sounds like a perfect place to start. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Riley's journey. If you enjoyed this, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share this story with even more people. Your support means the world.